Neanderthals' wild animal tracking technique. Imagine stepping into a world with no maps, no GPS, and not even a spoken language to describe where you're going. Now, picture yourself hunting a wild beast twice your size, armed with nothing but a wooden spear and your senses. That's the world of the Neanderthal. But here's the twist: these ancient humans weren't just brute hunters swinging clubs. They were masters of the land, skilled in an art few today can comprehend: wild animal tracking. And the deeper you go, the more astonishing it becomes. We often picture Neanderthals as clumsy cavemen, grunting and stumbling through prehistoric forests. But archaeological discoveries are rewriting that image. These people were not only strong, they were observant, calculating, and deeply connected to the rhythms of nature. Their survival depended on it. If they couldn't read the signs left behind by animals, they didn't eat. It was that simple. And so tracking became a language of its own, a silent communication between predator and prey, encoded in broken twigs, faint footprints, and the behavior of birds overhead. It all began with awareness. Neanderthals didn't just look at the ground, they looked through it. A bent blade of grass wasn't random, a patch of flattened earth told a story. They could tell how fresh a footprint was by the way the soil held moisture, or by how sharp the edges remained. They'd notice scratch marks on tree trunks, or fur snagged on low branches. They'd even smell the air for hints of musk or dung. While we walk through forests with eyes glued to our phones, they walked with minds wired into every scent, sound, and movement. But tracking wasn't just about following a trail. It was about thinking like the animal. If you were hunting a deer, you had to know where it slept, where it drank, when it moved, and what scared it. Neanderthals studied their prey with such intensity that they almost became it. They knew that after a rain, hoofprints became clearer. They knew where animals took shelter from wind or hid their young. And they understood seasonal patterns, where the herds migrated in winter, what trails they used when food was scarce. This was instinct layered with years of learned behavior, passed down through observation and imitation, not words. And when the track disappeared, when rain or wind erased the prints, they didn't give up. They read the forest like a living book. Broken spider webs, displaced pebbles, the distant alarm call of a bird, all were subtle cues. Some experts believe they even mimicked animal calls to lure or distract their prey, suggesting a level of creativity we rarely associate with Neanderthals. This wasn't random luck or brute force. This was methodical, informed, and astonishingly effective. Now think about this. Modern trackers, some indigenous peoples today who still live close to nature, have skills that eerily mirror those of Neanderthals. They can follow faint trails for miles, distinguish between the gait of a walking animal and a limping one, even sense if an animal is injured or tired. And they do it with little or no verbal communication, often working in silence, just like their ancient ancestors. It's as if this deep understanding of nature lives on, quietly passed from generation to generation, long after the Neanderthals vanished. In fact, evidence from Neanderthal campsites suggests a structured approach to hunting. Strategically chosen ambush points, coordinated group efforts, and even drive hunting techniques, where animals were herded into traps or off cliffs, all point to planning and communication. Their lives were dangerous, yes, but not chaotic. Everything had a rhythm, and tracking was the first beat of the hunt. What's most incredible is how much trust they placed in their senses. Where we rely on tools, they relied on themselves. Their eyes could spot slight discolorations in grass. Their ears could detect the difference between wind and movement. Their hands felt for warmth in the earth. To track like a Neanderthal wasn't just about knowledge, it was about presence. Being utterly, completely in tune with your surroundings, no distractions, no noise, just you, the forest, and the trail. And when the moment finally came, now that we've entered the mind of a Neanderthal tracker, let's step further into the shadows of the forest, where patience, silence, and calculation ruled everything. You followed faint hoofprints for miles, your body tuned to the rhythm of the land. You haven't spoken in hours, there's no need. Every gesture, every glance exchanged among your clan members speaks volumes, and suddenly you hear it. A soft rustle. Not the wind, not a falling branch, it's movement, something breathing, something alive. The hunt has begun. But let's pause for a second, because the beauty of Neanderthal tracking wasn't just in the chase, it was in the wait. You see, many people today think of hunting as a fast, brutal pursuit, but Neanderthals, they often waited for hours, even days. Not out of indecision, but because they understood timing. They didn't crash through the woods blindly. They anticipated. They knew when an animal would return to a watering hole. They knew what time of day it grazed, rested, or moved into thicker brush. This level of patience is rare today, but it was crucial back then. A single mistake meant a lost meal, or worse, a deadly counterattack from something far stronger. And that is another point people often overlook. Many of the animals Neanderthals hunted weren't timid deer or rabbits. They were huge, woolly rhinos, bison, wild horses, even mammoths. You didn't just stumble into these creatures and throw a spear. You had to know their habits, their escape routes, their weak points. Tracking meant strategy. It meant reading the herd from a distance, knowing which animal was old or injured, which path gave you the upper hand. These weren't reckless ambushes. They were calculated, often with several Neanderthals working together in total synchronization. Communication was key. But remember, Neanderthals likely didn't have complex spoken language like we do, so how did they coordinate these hunts? Through signs, gestures, eye contact, and rhythm. Imagine tapping on a rock 3 times to signal readiness, or holding up a hand with 2 fingers to mean go left. The more time they spent together, the more attuned they became, like a wordless orchestra. And within this silent strategy, tracking played the lead melody. If one tracker misread the trail or got the timing wrong, the whole plan could unravel. One of the most fascinating things is how they used the terrain to their advantage. They learned the landscape like the back of their hands, where the cliffs rose, where the soft earth might give way, where an animal could be cornered. You can almost picture them guiding a herd slowly toward a ravine or bottleneck, cutting off escape routes until the animal had nowhere left to run. This required foresight, a kind of mental mapping, and it all started with tracking, knowing where the prey had come from, where it was headed, and how to get ahead of it without being seen. And then there were the tools. Yes, Neanderthals were known for their stone tools, but they weren't crude. Their spears were weighted and balanced. Their cutting tools were sharp enough to slice hide and tendon, and many of these were adapted based on what they were tracking. Hunting a reindeer? You'd use lighter, faster projectiles. Going after a massive aurochs? You'd want something that could pierce thick hide. Every step of the tracking process, every clue they followed, helped inform the tools they used and the approach they took. It wasn't just instinct, it was problem-solving. But even with preparation, not every hunt succeeded, and when it failed, you crouch low, the moss damp beneath your fingertips, eyes scanning the earth. Just ahead, a disturbance in the leaves, barely visible to most. But to you, it's clear as daylight. Something passed here, recently. The trail picks up again, winding toward a cluster of trees. Your breath slows. Every movement becomes deliberate. This is the moment the hunt shifts, from pursuit to precision. And here's where Neanderthals truly excelled, because tracking wasn't just about spotting prints, it was about interpreting the story those prints told. Each indentation in the soil, every broken twig, was a word in a larger sentence, a set of deep, spaced-out tracks. That meant the animal was moving fast, probably startled, closely grouped, shallow imprints. It was moving slowly, perhaps grazing or cautious. A slight drag in one leg. Maybe it was injured. Neanderthals didn't just see a trail, they read it like a narrative unfolding in real time. And the climax of that story? It almost always came down to timing. You see, the closer the tracker got to the animal, the more every second mattered. The final stretch was a test of everything. Muscle control, wind direction, silence, anticipation, and the Neanderthals adapted with incredible finesse. If the prey was alert, they circled. If it was still feeding, they moved in low. Some even believe they masked their scent with mud or foliage, using rudimentary forms of camouflage. Imagine that for a moment. A Neanderthal crouched under pine branches, blending into the environment not just physically, but mentally, matching the stillness of the forest. Now, let's talk about how they struck. These weren't wild lunges. Their spears were often designed for thrusting, not throwing, meaning they had to get dangerously close. It was brutal, personal, and terrifying, but also skillful. To get within arm's reach of a powerful animal required not only courage, but mastery of terrain, silence, and, most of all, the track. And when they did throw, they aimed not just for the body, but for vital points. A wounded animal could escape, yes, but more importantly, it could fight back. A misjudged strike could mean injury or death. So their accuracy had to be near perfect. That's why so much of the tracking phase was about conserving energy, choosing the right target, and minimizing risk. But not all tracking ended in blood. Sometimes Neanderthals followed animals not to kill them immediately, but to observe, to learn migration routes, breeding patterns, or den locations. Archaeological evidence suggests they followed seasonal cycles, returning to the same hunting grounds year after year, adjusting their approach as conditions changed. In this sense, they weren't just trackers. They were naturalists, ecologists in their own right. They didn't conquer the environment, they listened to it. And think about the knowledge that came from this deep, generational tracking. Not just which animals were easiest to catch, but which ones gave the best return. The hunt is over. The final strike has landed. A deep guttural breath escapes your chest as the animal collapses, motionless. Around you, the clan emerges from the underbrush, silent at first, then unified in relief. But there's no cheering, no wild celebration, only quiet, reverent respect for the life taken. This isn't just survival, it's ceremony. And every part of it, from the first footprint to the final breath, was shaped by the ancient art of tracking. But what happens after the kill tells us just as much about Neanderthal intelligence as the hunt itself. Because even in death, the animal continued to teach. The way its muscles moved, the way its organs were laid out, how it reacted at the last moment. All of it was remembered. Neanderthals observed everything. They noted where the spear struck, how deeply it penetrated, how quickly the animal fell. And these lessons didn't stay with one person. They were shared, taught, preserved. Not through language the way we know it, but through imitation, repetition, and story told by gesture and memory. The younger members of the group watched closely. They weren't just there to carry meat. They were learning how to read the terrain, how to identify the freshest signs, how to stay downwind, how to walk without breaking a twig. Every hunt was a classroom, and the elders, they were the professors, not just teaching how to track, but when to be patient, when to strike, and, most importantly, when to walk away. Because sometimes the trail wasn't worth it. Sometimes the signs told of an animal too strong, too fast, or leading the hunters too far from safety. Knowing when not to hunt was as vital as knowing how. That wisdom is what truly set Neanderthal trackers apart. This wasn't random wandering. It was purposeful movement guided by years, generations of accumulated experience. And it shaped more than just their hunts. It shaped how they built camps, where they stored food when they moved, who stayed behind and who pressed forward. Tracking was the foundation of their way of life. Now picture this. Long before roads, before towns, even before language had structure, Neanderthals left behind invisible trails through mountains, forests, and valleys. They followed animal migrations,